Hey guys, it's Bex here, and I'm here with my good friend Mike Perrine of Everyday Detox. And in this last portion of our podcast, we're talking about women and childbirth and whether or not we get to have opinions on their experiences. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so remember to leave them as we go in the comments below.
You sent me an article recently and you asked what my opinion was on it. And the title of the article was "You Don't Get to Have an Opinion About How I Give Birth or anyone else." And I think that this is going to be the last video for today because I'm going to get super worked up here.
Okay.
This is going to make your podcast long, and it's going to make for a very long video.
Speak your mind.
Okay, a little bit of background. So this is a woman. She's also a doula. She wrote an article for Jezebel, one of my favorite sites. Talk about clickbait.
Right?
Oh, gosh.
That's a trap.
I mean, but there's a lot of good stuff on there. I mean, I have to say. But so she wrote this article about how you can't have an opinion about how other people give birth because it's a very personal experience that we don't always have complete control over. Things can go to the left very fast. You know, you can end up in emergency situations in the middle of childbirth. You can end up having a cesarean. And why would we assign any shame to those decisions? And when I have opinions about how women give birth, it is not to assign shame to things that just happen because it sometimes can be a medical experience. When I have opinions about how women give birth, it's to talk about my experience, how I've given birth. It's my opinion about how I've given birth. And then also to offer education and alternatives to women so that they can be educated, empowered. They have tools that they can go into to their care providers and say, like, this is how I want my experience to go. And I want them to feel strong in their own opinions and their own decisions. So I want to offer my opinions as education or just as insight a little bit because I've been there. I've done it a bunch of times. I've witnessed it. I've witnessed experience with friends a bunch of times. I've seen women be very disappointed with their birth experiences, and that has scarred them for life. It has gotten in the way of bonding with their children. It has affected their ability to breastfeed. It's affected their relationship with their partner because they've been so traumatized by birth experience. So she writes this article, and in part of the spirit of it was, don't have opinions because you can hurt someone who's already had a hurtful experience. And I get that. I would never judge any woman, especially after the fact, like, oh, you shouldn't have had a cesarean, or you shouldn't have had this intervention, or you shouldn't have gotten the epidural, because what does that serve? But I'm here in service to people to tell them that they can have an experience that they want. And even if the experience goes to the left, even if they end up having, it going not as planned, that they don't have to be traumatized by it because they can feel empowered and they can feel like they had a say in how things happened. So she's saying don't have an opinion. And it's like, okay, we don't have an opinion. Now what? Who does that serve? Now we don't say anything.
Right. But in the way that she presented it, and the reason I kind of stopped reading it was because I was like, it's like, it was sort of like this trap. It was like this slippery slope into, well, then how could we have an opinion about anything? How could we judge anything then? Like, if you can't be a doula or a health educator and say, I think that we should aim to have, drugless pregnancies, natural pregnancies, if we can, like, or deliveries rather, if you can't have that opinion because it might hurt somebody's feeling, what's the point? People are going to get from birth to death, and we should be able to have an opinion about how we should live life, about how we should do processes, and we should be able to share that because it could inspire somebody into something bigger.
So we have to talk about how much does the process matter. So yes, so someone will say, I smoke cigarettes, I'm going to die anyway, so why not smoke cigarettes? And then we get into talk about like quality of life and length of life and like all of those types of things. And in the same regard with the childbirth experience, yes, it's always the highest priority to have a healthy baby and a healthy mom at the end of it. How much does the process really matter? So we have to answer that question for ourselves. And I'm just talking about birth, and we're going to talk about food and like all the other stuff too. But in my opinion, the process not as important, but has so tremendous value. Not just so much value, tremendous value. It changes who you are as a person, as a mother, as a partner to witness it. Partners that are there for natural, drug-free childbirth. It changes them. It promotes better bonding. It promotes easier breastfeeding. And I believe in a spiritual sense, and even, I mean, just because the child is not having drugs introduced into its system, on its first day outside the womb, it changes who the child is. So I think it's tremendously important. I think that people need to be talking about their opinions about childbirth a lot more, and doing it in a way that's very passionate and personal for them, and not in a way that shames, but a way that celebrates their own good, happy experiences. Because we never hear about that. We hear about all these traumatic stories about childbirth, of it was like so painful and it was so terrible and it was so scary. And there's not enough women standing up and saying, I had this amazing experience that I felt all the feels and I lived to tell the story and it was amazing and I would do it again. Like, no one is saying that. I mean, there's like this small sect of like the hypnobirthing moms and stuff that are really excited about it, but they seem like weirdos. But women all over are having these amazing natural birth experiences, and they're afraid to tell them because then you're shaming all the women who didn't or didn't go your way. Like, I can't talk about breastfeeding, and I get a lot of negative comments when I make breastfeeding posts because there's women who can't do it, and I'm somehow shaming them. Not at all.
I've heard a lot of women in my life, like, overheard these things where they joke about like how fast they want the epidural when they have their baby, and like they just don't do that. They don't go that way. They don't want to do a natural thing. Then they make jokes about it and everything. But like
that makes me sad.
I know, but I think that it's like, what's wrong with somebody going, hey, you can show up to that a little bit differently and have this really deep, rich experience, because some people will thank them for it.
Because no one's told them that.
Because no one told you that.
Everyone told them that it was so scary, so they're anxious to make it not scary for themselves. They're protecting themselves. That's totally normal. If someone says something's going to hurt really bad and it's going to be really scary and terrible, I want to protect myself from that. I did it. I had 3 epidurals. I get it. And then I experienced the other way, and I want to share that. I want to share that there's another way. There's an alternative. There's this perspective. This is what I went through. This could be glorious for you. And even if they decide at the end of it to still go with the epidural, because like, okay, well, that's not that important to me, that's fine. But at least go into it being educated, at least be informed. Like, that's what I feel my job is, just to inform you. And then you can do whatever you want. And I really don't care. I mean, I do care. I actually do care. I want all women to feel like all the great experience of like fully what our bodies can do. But I'm not going to judge you for it or not be your friend because you had an epidural.
Do you feel like it's important, just for women, and especially even generationally, to pass that information on to each other and handhold each other into things? Because I know, it's hard for me to talk about the birth process, obviously, right, being a man, but I've gone through different experiences that were extremely challenging, painful, and things like that, where I didn't want to go in there, and I was challenged and almost brought into them from other men that knew that I would have a transformative experience and come out on the other side.
Well, that's why I'm a doula.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that why you do the work that you do too?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, our work at the end of the day is it's to be of service to other people and to bring, and we have the perspective of being in one place and going to another. So now we have to step up and bring, those people through that transition. I mean, the most important work that I'm ever going to do in my life is as being a doula. The magic of video, and baby Annabelle reappears. The most important work I'm going to do in this life is going to be as a doula, because that has been the most profound experience that I've ever had. I think that that's where my testimony is as a human being, is bringing life into this world, and being a mom is the most important thing to me. Doesn't have to be the most important thing to everybody. Disclaimer there.
Well, you're very good at it.
So I want to tell that story of how it changed me as a woman. And it didn't change me with the first baby. It didn't change me with the second or the third. Like, obviously it changed me, it turned me into a mother. It changed my path and my journey. But where I felt this profound spiritual change. I know you're going to nurse, and it's okay in this video. I know. I know. this profound spiritual change was when I experienced my completely drug-free, intervention-free, intervention meaning I did not step into a hospital, when I did it at home in an intimate setting. And the first home birth was amazing. The second one changed even more because it was more intimate. It was less like with the first one, I had a lot of family around. The second one, it was just my husband and me and my midwives. So, and that's another thing that women don't understand too, that I just want to say, that intervention starts the moment you step through the hospital doors. That's when the intervention starts. And that's when you, not that you lose control, but this is why it's important for women to hear this message so that they know when they need to start enforcing their control. And that's my role as a doula, to just be there for her, to remind her of the things that she may have forgotten about her plan, because monitors and strangers and students and people are touching her and prodding her and hooking her up to things. And it starts becoming a little bit overwhelming when you want to focus on this birth experience. So I remove all of that stuff for her. You know, I kind of like have a little shield where I keep her calm and at peace and inside herself, because that's where she needs to be at that moment. So
Tell me quickly.
Yeah, you talk to me.
I did the research on this a little bit. I read up on it
Okay.
when I was talking to Amethyst a few weeks ago. The difference between a doula and a midwife.
Okay, well, a midwife is a care provider who actually delivers the baby. She's like a doctor.
Medical training.
Yeah. She's
Okay.
so a doula is a completely non-medical person. She's non-medical personnel. Doula.
So sort of an educator and an emotional supporter and
Well, the word means it's from Greek and it's basically servant to a woman. So I'm just there for the woman and her partner to offer emotional, educational support, constant support. So it could be anything from rubbing feet to, you know, practicing affirmations and meditation with her, to running out to get something for them to eat so that the husband can serve her better or the partner can serve her better. It's just like, it's anything you need. I'm just there. I'm there for support of the woman and her partner if she so wishes.
well, I think that I recognize the reason why that kind of got us all worked up, that article. And the flaw in it is the title of it is you should, or I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but
You don't get to have an opinion.
you don't get to have an opinion. I think that it might have been better delivered and served if it were, you don't get to judge somebody on the choices they've made or something like that, because we all know that in life. We all know that. I mean, and sometimes things are very powerful. Like there are people that are involved in, they go into very deep, dark places with bad experiences like drugs and bad decisions and things like that. And then it serves them very well. Like you look at the life of Malcolm X or somebody like that. Like when they go to dark places and they either get sick or make bad choices and they have awakenings, like, yes, all these, you know, things can kind of serve people. And so to judge somebody based on those things can be a dangerous place and a slippery slope. But to have an opinion on how somebody should live a better life, or to say, you know, there's this other experience in the birth process that you might want to investigate, because I think it's a very rich experience, isn't shaming anybody. That's why
But
I think
people loved it. It was so like, yeah, right on, because you know, my baby had, and this is another really dangerous thing that came out of that. If I can interrupt and talk over you for a second. Then what happens is everybody thinks that they're the exception. So all these people who had to have cesareans or couldn't breastfeed because their body didn't make enough milk, or their doctors told them they had to supplement or whatever, people who were probably robbed of a beautiful experience, because we all know that all the intervention rates are way too high. I just read a really interesting article from Consumer Reports, and you know that hippie rag, those revolutionaries. They did this amazing story on interventions in American hospitals and how it's not making us safer. In fact, it's making us far more like at higher risk of infant mortality and mothers dying in childbirth. It's super, super scary. And so they wrote all this stuff because doctors and medical professionals are telling people that they have to do this because it's convenient or because they're scared of malpractice. So all of these women walking around saying, I had to have a cesarean, you probably didn't. You really probably didn't. And for us not to have an opinion on that because we're scared of telling you that you were wrong. I'm more scared of you getting pregnant again and having another dangerous, unnecessary procedure. So maybe for the next time. That's what's scary. So you don't have an opinion. You could be saving someone's life potentially, or at least saving their spirit. So I will continue to have opinions.
You are so worked up today.
I am, because I don't know why people don't care about each other's souls. We care so much about hurting their feelings, but we don't care at all about saving their souls or building good relationships or the future of the species. You know, it's like, if we continue to become so disconnected from these processes that we were meant to go through, even the pain of childbirth, what are we going to be like? What does our future look like when we don't even know what it's like to feel human anymore? Because we're drugging ourselves with either like actual drugs or food as drugs. Like we're trying to avoid pain in every single instance, and we don't even know what it feels like to be human. It's just so sad to me. I could do this for like the next 6 hours.
I'm so glad that I sent you that. Well, we're going to do another podcast either tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
And I know we have more questions.
You can watch the entire podcast by visiting Mike over at youtube.com/everydaydetox, or you can stick around and watch my entire nutrition playlist by clicking on that video thumbnail right there on your screen or on the link in the video description. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon in another Bex Life video.